Russia has warned the United States that arms shipments to Ukraine could bring, quote, unpredictable consequences. This comes as the administration authorizes the delivery of more sophisticated weapons than in previous shipments. Ryan Evans is the founder of War on the Rocks and CEO of Metamorphic Media. Ryan, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we talk about specifics about the weapons themselves, how is the fight going to be different in eastern Ukraine and the Donbass region than what we've seen before?
Yeah, the war has definitely entered a new phase. Putin's opening military strategy was frankly disastrous, trying to fight on too many fronts, all of those fronts poorly supported except arguably the south and the east. And so he's consolidating his effort towards the east in Donbass and trying to say that this is what he was trying to do all along. But this really makes it more of a war of attrition that is focused much more on a specific area of Ukraine's geography. So some people will be reminded when they see imagery coming out of this next phase of the fight of things that were happening in the world wars in terms of the intensity and the way troops are positioned and the way certain weapon systems are being used.
And why is taking control of the Donbass region so strategically important to the Russians?
I think it's really Putin trying to salvage something out of the wreckage of this disastrous war, because this war, no matter how this next phase ends, will be a disaster for Russia. So Putin, it's important for him to say, well, we pulled the Donbass out of it. And that's actually what we were trying to do all the time, he'll say, but that's of course not true. But the Donbass is where the fighting happened in 2014, of course, after Euromaidan, when Ukraine democratically ousted its dictatorial leader who was close to Moscow, who had killed protesters. And that's when Moscow, with Russian-backed separatists, took control of parts of the Donbass. And now he wants to take the whole thing.
So part of the latest military aid package includes Howitzers. Describe those and how the Ukrainians would use them.
These are basically large cannons, just to simplify totally. And it's not just the United States giving them, but other European countries are looking at giving them as well. And these are large artillery pieces that are going to be useful for this sort of war of attrition where there's a recognizable front line and where forces are being pushed back. And it's crucial for Ukraine to have these weapon systems because Russia has a lot of them. Russia is short on people, but has a lot of kit. It has a lot of artillery and a lot of munitions, and that's what Ukraine lacks right now. So for Ukraine to protect its own forces from artillery, it needs artillery of its own.
There are 300 switchblade drones, 11 Mi-17 helicopters that President Zelensky specifically asked for in the package. What will they be able to do in Ukraine?
The switchblade drones are interesting. Well, basically, these are called loitering munitions, and they're different from drones. They're actually more like missiles. They're one time, one use. You use it, you lose it. They are fired either from a tube or some other system, and they're launched into the air. They find a target and they detonate on it. There are two different kinds of switchblades. It's unclear which ones the United States has actually sent to Ukraine. There's the 300 model and the 600 model. The 600 model is the really valuable one. It's bigger, it has some more range, but more importantly, it could take out tanks, which is what Ukraine really needs right now. As far as the helicopters, I'm not sure what their practical use in battle is going to be. I think Zelensky's been pursuing a sort of throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks in terms of what he's been asking for understandable reasons. That's not a criticism. But it's not clear to me how useful these helicopters are going to be.
Well, I mean, you know, you say asking for everything. I wonder why we didn't send these to begin with. Why didn't we start with these kinds of weapons? The Ukrainians have been asking for them for a long time.
I think for two reasons. One is that, frankly, the United States expected Ukraine to fall much quicker than it did. Second, these weapons were not as useful for the sort of war that Ukraine was fighting up until now. So whereas before Russian forces were spread out over vast stretches of Ukraine, the key was to deny Russia air superiority and to give Ukraine the ability to take out tanks. And for that, we provided lots of different systems, but most prominently, of course, Javelin anti-tank missiles, which have been used to great effect by the Ukrainians, as well as a variety of different anti-air systems, most of them man-portable, which just means a person can carry them around, that have been really effective in denying Russia air superiority. So those were the right weapons for the right time in the fight. And now that the nature of the fight is changing, new weapons are required by Ukraine if it is to continue to be successful in this war and drive Russia out of the rest of Ukraine.
You know, initially there was a lot of talk about fear of escalation with Russia, and we can't send certain weapons because that might be seen as escalatory. Do you think that those initial fears were unjustified in hindsight?
So I have no special insight into the administration's thinking on this. I just know what I've read in the press, just like you and just like many of your listeners. But my view on this is the escalation risk was less about which kinds of weapons were getting sent to Ukraine, but how they were getting there. So, for example, there was a big hullabaloo over the MiG-29, which is a Soviet-era aircraft that Poland had some of and wanted to give to Ukraine, but didn't want to take the risk on by themselves to give it to Ukraine, because, of course, that would involve at some point probably Ukrainian pilots flying them from Polish territory into Ukraine to fight a war, which could be used as Russia saying, hey, you're using NATO territory to launch attacks on Russian troops, which makes NATO countries a belligerent in this war. That's why Poland wanted to offload that risk on the United States and wanted the United States to give them to Ukraine from Germany. So in my opinion, it's less about what these weapons are, but how we get them to Ukraine and into the fight. But I don't know the nature of the administration's thinking on this.
And in the 30 seconds we've got left, how does this end, Ryan?
I don't know. I think that either Russia will be able to get its act together and either hold on to the Donbass or even open up a front again north of Kiev. That's my greatest fear, that they're able to reopen that front up more effectively north of Kiev and drive towards the capital again. But hopefully Ukraine is able to drive Russia from every last inch of Ukrainian territory. We'll see.
All right, Ryan, appreciate you being on the program. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.